everybody. Thank you for checking back in this week. Last week we looked at relationships and how we can, really be a light to those around us. How Jesus and God are the centerpiece of a relationship, and whatever our relationship is with them is what in turn is what our relationship with others are going to be like. And it was really a blueprint on how we can take those and apply those out and really make good relationships with those around us. This week we're going to continue to look at relationships, and this week what we're going to really focus on is how in a relationship we should be encouragers, how we should encourage others with everything that we do. So without any more hesitation, let's jump into the lesson. We're going to be in Acts chapter 9 to start with, verses 26 to 28. Then we'll jump ahead to chapter 11 of Acts and look at a few verses there. But we're really going to be looking at Barnabas, all right? Barnabas, that was not his given name. His given name was Joseph of Cyprus, but he was given the name Barnabas because of how encouraging he was. Barnabas actually means son of encouragement. So we know that just by the name that he carries around, that this is a man who is really going to be an encourager, who's going to go out of his way to make sure that people are doing their absolute best and encouraging them to do even better. So first section, Acts chapter 9, verses 26 and 28, the scriptures say this: When he arrived in Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, since they did not believe he was a disciple. Barnabas, however, took him and brought him to the apostles and explained to them how Saul had seen the Lord on the road and that the Lord had talked to him, and how in Damascus he had spoken boldly in the name of Jesus. Saul was coming and going with them in Jerusalem, speaking boldly in the name of the Lord. Now, imagine you've got all of the disciples. Jesus has been crucified. You've got Saul coming in, Saul of Tarsus, who is a very strict Jew. He is someone who is really just laying down the law. He's very much against Christ and the disciples. Anybody that is out there who's proclaiming Christ and the disciples, Saul is against them. He is persecuting them. He is the main man in charge of doing that. So we fast forward into the ministry. We've already had the Damascus Road experience where Saul is going to see Jesus Christ, having a conversation with Jesus Christ, and Barnabas is actually going to be the first person that goes to Saul, and that's how Saul's sight is returned. Now Saul has officially become a follower of Jesus Christ, and now we are back here in Jerusalem. So Saul of Tarsus, who was a persecutor of Christians, is now a big Christian himself, who is someone who's proclaiming Jesus Christ, is coming into Jerusalem. He's trying to get in and hang out with all the other disciples and, do the disciple things, but none of the disciples wanted anything to do with him. They were afraid of him, and for very good reason, because remember, this is the guy that has been going out. He's been persecuting Christians. He's been killing Christians. He was there when Stephen was stoned to death for his beliefs. So you've got a guy who's very much has some anti-Christian, some anti-Jesus Christ tendencies, now trying to come in, trying to be a part of that disciples group, and they're scared. But it took one man. It took Barnabas. Barnabas, he brought Saul, who's going to become Paul. He brought Saul to the apostles. He explained, he said, look, here's what happened to Saul. And he goes through the story of the Damascus Road experience. He tells them, he says, look, this man was blind. When I come upon him, he was completely blind. He told about his experience with Jesus, and then his sight was restored. So Barnabas here is really encouraging all of the other disciples in the aspect of acceptance, all right? He's saying, look, Paul, he's bringing Paul from a place of persecution into a place of influence with the other apostles. And even though Paul's heart's been changed, the believers in Jerusalem, they can't see that. Barnabas is really the only one that had experience in the fact that Barnabas's heart has been changed. Barnabas realized that Paul or Saul had been changed. Therefore, Barnabas is going to go and he's going to be a vouch for him. He's going to vouch for him. He's going to encourage the other apostles to accept him. He's putting himself out there, because what if Paul or Saul, whatever you want to call him at this point, what if he's not really become a Christian? What if he's simply putting on a ploy so that he can exploit all the other Christians and persecute them and possibly even execute them? Barnabas is putting himself out there. He says, "Look, man, this is my guy. I know him. Come in here, y'all just meet him." And so he is encouraging those around him to really accept what Saul has become, and that is that he has become a follower of Christ. Because of that encouragement, because of how Barnabas set himself out there for Paul, the other disciples are going to open the door. They're also going to open their hearts and accept Paul for who he is. And of course, we know that Paul is going to become one of the main driving forces in spreading the gospel. And through the ministry of just this one single man, just Paul himself, the gospel of Christ is going to make it into Rome, which in turn is going to make it into the entirety of Western civilization. Now, Barnabas, there's no way that Barnabas could have seen the impact that Paul's ministry was going to have, but Barnabas was simply doing what he had always done his whole life, and the whole reason he got the name of Barnabas, and that was he was helping to encourage his fellow believers take the next step in their spiritual growth. Even when he saw just the most minute, just smallest little bit of potential in somebody, he is in turn encouraging them in Jesus. So you never know what kind of difference your encouragement or your life may make for those around you. So always remember the story of Barnabas and how he's an encourager, and how this one man's simple encouragement to the rest of the disciples has in turn impacted all of ministry all across the face of the earth because of this one man, Paul, who was a persecutor, now is becoming a proclaimer. So when have you felt like the new kid on the block? Have you ever been in that position where you're trying to, maybe you moved to a new school or you've joined a new group or whatever, you're trying to break in? Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever been in that situation? Because that's exactly where Paul's at. Paul's the new kid on the block. He's now become a follower of Jesus Christ, and he's trying to get in with all of the other disciples, but that door's not really opening because of who he was beforehand. And then what risk do you take to put yourself on the line to outsiders, right? What do you do? How do you really throw yourself out there? Paul's got a hard task here. He's trying to throw himself out there for all the other disciples to maybe accept him, but instead, it takes another man. It takes Barnabas to come up and say, "Look, this is my guy, Paul. Yes, he's persecuted us in the past, but his life has been changed because of the same person who changed our lives." So what have you experienced in that aspect? Moving on to the next part, we're still talking about encouragement, and encouragement is always going to strengthen relationships. In Acts chapter 11, verses 21 through 24, the scriptures read, "The Lord's hand was with them, and a large number who believed turned to the Lord. News about them reached the church in Jerusalem, and they sent out Barnabas to travel as far as Antioch. When he arrived and saw the grace of God, he was glad and encouraged all of them to remain true to the Lord with devoted hearts. For he was a good man, full of the Holy Spirit and of faith. And large numbers of people were added to the Lord." All right. No surprise here. We see the name Barnabas, and we also see encouragement happening here. In this part here, Barnabas is we're seeing where he is encouraging growth. He's encouraging these people to continue growing in their faith in Jesus Christ. All right. He's not only encouraging them to accept the other believers around them, but he's encouraging those already believers to continue to grow spiritually, continue to do things to grow themselves. Now, in Acts chapter 11, we've read about Barnabas being commissioned by the apostles. All right, the apostles say, "All right, Barnabas, we need you to go and do this. We need you to travel up to Antioch. It's going to take you, you'll cover 300 miles." But they are commissioning him to do this. They're sending him out. Many of the Jews who were in Antioch, they had already embraced Christianity, and being that they had already embraced Christianity, they've already started to spread the gospel around to the Gentiles, and because of that, the Greeks in the region are starting to begin to come to the faith in Christ. Now, when the apostles get wind of this news, when they start to learn that not only are the Jewish people in Antioch becoming Christians, but also that the Greek, the Gentile people are becoming Christian, they want Barnabas to go, and they want Barnabas to really, hey, go see what's going on. Tell us what is going on in that situation. So Barnabas goes, he sees the situation, and then again, he's going to report back on exactly what God is doing that. Now, in the book of Luke, Luke, who wrote the book of Acts, he's going to paint this beautiful picture of Barnabas' ministry, all right? Persecution, because of the persecution, believers had scattered, and then the kingdom of God is going to advance wherever they went. So imagine you've got this small group of believers, they begin to get persecuted, so to avoid being so heavily persecuted, they're going to scatter out. Now, as that seed goes out, as they spread out, that's where you're really going to start to see some of this growth. And Barnabas is seeing this happening, and he's going to encourage them. He says, look, you've already spread out. You're continuing to share the word. Just continue to do that. Remain true to the Lord. Just continue to do exactly what it is you're doing. You've spread out, and in that spreading out, you've already started planting seeds in other places. You're growing the faith. Continue to do that. Barnabas surely strengthened these new saints enormously. All right, he's really going to do a lot of things to really help them persevere. He's going to give them words of encouragement and just power to continue to do the things that they've been doing. While they probably surely welcome those and receive those with joy, their future is going to require a very strong commitment. The church is going to be challenged by persecution, but the church is also going to be challenged by famine. To a Christian, to be a Christian was to accept the road of suffering. Still, that journey, that suffering, it still could be made up of joy. It still, you can still find happiness in that. So Barnabas did more than just really pay just lip service to the joy of knowing Jesus Christ. He showed the love of Jesus Christ. He was excited every day that he was able to really enjoy and show how excited he was to live in Jesus Christ. Because of that, the message that he preached and the life that he conducted, those two things matched up to perfectly show the gospel. It perfectly showed how excited that Barnabas was to be a believer, and that serves as an encouragement to others to continue to do the things that they're doing. Not only do you just continue to do, but you're going to grow in those things. Barnabas, he's going to face hostile Jewish people. He's going to face some hostile Gentiles who are very much opposed to the message. But every time he does, he's going to just simply take that false belief and he's going to turn it on them, and he's going to lead people to faith in Jesus Christ. He's always going to be positive, always remaining encouraging in those things. It was likely a challenge for him to continue to encourage others when he himself needed encouragement, but he still did it. You know, there's people out there that they just pour out and they pour out and they pour out and they pour out, and sometimes you wonder, man, how does that person continue to pour out? That's where we as Christians come along. You know, Barnabas, he's continually pouring out, and we kind of ask the question, you know, how could Barnabas continue to pour out when there's really nothing going in? That's where we as other Christians step in, and we pour that encouragement into them as well. Barnabas is an excellent example of somebody who is going to continue to encourage no matter what the situation is around them. Now, maybe you're in a spot in your life where you just really need some encouragement from your friend. I know we've all probably been separated for quite some time now, and maybe you just need an encouragement word. Maybe that friend of yours needs you to send them an encouraging word. Maybe, you know, through this quarantine we've been separated out and we maybe lost touch, but maybe there's some friend out there that's been on your heart. Maybe you're on their list where you could take that word of encouragement and you could give it to them. Be Barnabas, all right? Be Barnabas. Begin that process of investing in the others, giving them encouragement, and see if that encouragement also comes to you from other places that you couldn't even expect. So how do we intentionally grow in the role of an encourager? How do we continually get that process of always encouraging somebody? What role did encouragement play in the church at Antioch? So why did the church at Antioch really uh, experience good from this? And then when have you been blessed through the encouragement of others? Has there ever been a time where just a simple word of "you've got this" or "keep going" or whatever has encouraged you? We've all had those moments. Be that moment for somebody else. Pay it forward. Do what you need to do. So, jumping into the last section here, we're still talking about encouragement, that encouragement that's going to strengthen relationships. Acts chapter 11, picking up verses 25 and 26, says this. Then he went to Tarsus to search for Saul, and when he found him, he brought him to Antioch. For a whole year, they met with the church and taught large numbers. The disciples were first called Christians at Antioch. All right, so Barnabas' third lesson here is that we should encourage service. We should encourage those around us to serve people around them. You know, you made my week with that beautiful song. We sang some songs this morning for our worship service that'll go live in the morning. Man, in the eye of the storm, you think about what's going on with just this whole coronavirus and all that. You know, knowing that is encouragement. That knowing that even in the midst of all of this, God is still God. That's great. That's a good encouragement. Encouraging somebody to study the Bible. Hey, you know, I know you've had a hard time. The sickness is going around, or you've been isolated here or there. You ever thought about just picking up a Bible and reading it? Those are encouraging words that could help somebody get on the path, and that's a way that you can encourage relationships or strengthen a relationship through some encouragement. Now, kind words motivate growth. So anytime that you're sharing a kind word with somebody, that's going to encourage them to grow. You know, hey, you did a great job up there singing that solo. Well, now that person that was singing that solo is going to start to reach up and say, hey, you know, maybe I should do this a little more. Maybe I can do this better. Or, hey, you know, you did a good job out there on the soccer field tonight. And maybe that person is now going to take a step forward and do even better when it comes to soccer. Those little words of encouragement would help people mature in the faith. Hey, you know, you did a really good job leading that prayer at the Bible group or whatever situation it may be. That's going to help somebody, encourage them to grow their faith. We don't know exactly what Barnabas said to Saul, but as the church in Antioch began to grow, Barnabas went to Tarsus directly to connect with Paul and to bring him back and say, hey, look, this place, Antioch, is really starting to grow. This is a place that's 300 miles from Jerusalem. It's out here. Saul, Paul, why don't you come? Why don't you help foster this growth in this church? It's growing, but I think you could make it even better. God had gifted Paul with specific and special ways to reach these people. So once Paul steps on the scene there, you're really going to start to see this church explode in Antioch. Barnabas had recognized this. Barnabas saw this in Paul, and so he invited Paul directly to come to Antioch to serve in the church there because he knew that once we put these two things together, it's going to explode. Now, at one time, Barnabas had served as a mentor to Saul, okay, or Paul. Barnabas was the lead, and Paul was going to be the follower there. Barnabas was pouring into him with encouragement, watching him grow in his faith. Now, all of a sudden, Paul has matured in his faith to a point to where now Barnabas' ministry, that they're on level with each other, they're peers, and they're going to become two very strong forces that begin to disciple new believers in this situation. So revival was evident as Saul and Barnabas used their life-giving words to impact young Christians. So these two guys, Barnabas, Saul, used to be like this. Now they've come together. They're equals, and they're now using their gifts and their abilities to really pour into the Christians around them. But we can't miss the fact that God used Barnabas to encourage Saul in his faith as a Christian to really grow into the Paul that we know. Barnabas didn't just use words of encouragement, words to encourage Saul's ministry and teaching. He encouraged him through his actions. He went out, he actually grabbed him out and said, hey, look, I need you to go with me. Come serve alongside of me. Help me to do this in this place. Those actions really set a tempo for Paul. And because of that tempo that was set in Paul's life, we've all been affected through this. And it simply come from the encouragement that Barnabas showed him at a time when it could have been easy to say, look, Saul, you've persecuted Christians. I'm out. Bye. See you later. Barnabas instead saw the good in him. And because of that good in him, he's going to really pour into him and say, look, you could be great. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 says, and let us watch out for one another to provoke love and good works. So be encouraged to follow that example and to do those things, to really go out and show people, look for the good in people, encourage people to really be their best, and especially when it comes to their Christian faith. Be looking for those things and encourage others because it's the world we live in. You don't see a lot of encouragement. So when you see it, don't just see it and take note. See it, take note, and act on it. Give somebody that word of encouragement. So what are some things that might get in the way of people using their spiritual gifts in the church? Maybe you have a gift of teaching, or you have a gift of serving, whatever your gift may be. What are some things that can get in your way of that? What are some things that can stop you from that? Maybe your shyness, maybe, I'm too young for this, or maybe I've been a bad person in this part of my life. What are things that get in the way of you using your spiritual gifts within the church? What might hold us back from encouraging others? What keeps us from actually going and saying, hey, great job? Maybe it's the thought of looking like a fool or whatever, but hey, go out, use those words, use that encouragement to really help somebody out. And then how can we actively encourage others to use their spiritual gifts? How do we encourage others to take the gift that God is giving them and in turn use that in the church to help not only themselves, but to help those around them grow in their faith? So I hope you really took some notes here in Barnabas' life and seen how he was an encouragement to Paul. And then we know the impact that Paul had on us as future believers. But just going back and looking at this one man's life who just simple words of encouragement, encouraging the disciples to accept Saul, even though he'd been a persecutor, but then also encouraging Paul to come out and say, hey, look, here's Antioch, here's a place, Christianity's growing, I need your help, come grow along beside me. So I hope you took something from this. I hope that we can in turn take this and maybe apply it out, and you can encourage somebody else. And I hope somebody comes along and encourages you. So thank you for joining in. Be sure to check out this week's message from Brother Jeff. Really good story there. And then just continue to check back in. Wednesday night we'll have our call, and so be ready for that. 7 o'clock we'll hang out and just do some talking. But it's really good to see you, and I hope you all enjoy this. Bye.